Okay, joining us this afternoon is Justin Turner, another kind of old boy of Hale who's really gone on to some great heights in rugby. Joining me today is Steve McFarland as well, our MIC long-term first 15 coach. But firstly, Justin, thanks for joining us.
Oh, not a problem at all, guys. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Now, let's start with a little bit of your time at Hale. Can you tell us a little bit about the sports you played as a teenager, both in the community and for Hale, please?
Yeah, sure. So I played in the summer. I played cricket, and I've always played rugby in the winter. My family are South African, so I kind of got into the rugby sort of circles pretty early. And then kind of in between, I did a little bit of athletics, kind of early summer. And then outside of the sports at school, I played more sort of club rugby and club cricket. And I was always involved with my old man doing a bit of golf and down the beach surfing with my brother and stuff. But my two main sports have been rugby and cricket.
Fantastic. Now, house sport at Hale, it's a pretty unique thing. You know, I mean, no other school does it like ours. What house are you in? Do you have some memories of playing house sport?
Yeah, certainly do. I was in Haynes, so same house as Dane, who was one of my close friends coming up through sort of the rugby ranks. So I played touch rugby in the summer. Or in the winter, I should say, and then cricket in the summer. And yeah, you're so right about the house sport at Hale being quite unique and no one really kind of doing it like us. I don't remember the format exactly of the house cricket, but it was quite fun in a way where you had two inningses and it was a really short sort of overs each way. And yeah, I remember sort of some of those games being quite exciting and good fun. So Those are some of my best memories, probably playing house cricket and house touch for Haynes.
Surely, if there's Dane Hale-Petty and Justin Turner in the same house touch rugby team, you won. Tell me you won the comp. Just confirm that for me.
I don't know. Well, you would have thought we'd done quite well, but I kind of remember us underachieving quite a lot, to be honest. We probably thought we were probably a little bit big for our boots and got undone by some of the more sort of just well-rounded, solid teams. But no, it was always good fun playing with Dane and trying a few things on the touch rugby field.
Excellent. So turning to PSA competition, like in rugby and cricket for Hale, you would have played a lot of games. Is there, and particularly in rugby, you're part of some really successful teams. Is there a certain game or a certain win that stands out more than others?
Yeah, I mean, playing PSA sport was a highlight of my sort of schooling career. And like you say, the rugby, we were super successful under Steve and Robbie Barra through year 10, 11 and 12. So lots and lots of memorable wins. But I guess the one that probably does stand out a little bit was we went up to Guildford and we all caught the bus up there and we kind of watching a few highlights of some old sort of school rugby teams and that. And we all went out kind of all pretty pumped up and we just put together a really, really good performance, and I can't remember the score. It was quite a tally, but yeah, there was a good, enjoyable experience with all the guys getting behind it. And yeah, just that lead up to the game on the bus was fantastic.
Excellent. Now, in terms of Hale teachers, and you can't say Steve, you can't answer this question with Steve. Okay, we forgot to tell Dane that bit. Is there a teacher that had a significant influence on you, maybe in the classroom or on the sporting fields? Is there one that comes to mind?
I had an English teacher, Mr. Hopkins, and he just had a really good sort of relationship with all the boys, and he does stand out as a teacher that maybe I really enjoyed his classes. Maybe it was the fact that we had a pretty tight group of boys in that class, so we all got on pretty well. But he just had a great rapport with all the guys and made the classes engaging and quite fun. And we managed to get through the content as well. So he was someone that stood out. And then, of course, other than the sports coaches like Mr. Young and I'll say it, Steve and Robbie and that obviously had a big influence on my rugby stuff. So, yeah, a couple of really, really standout teachers there.
Fantastic. So you would have left Hale around about 13 years ago. Can you take us through a little bit of your rugby, particularly your rugby journey after that and what you've done since then?
Yeah, definitely. So I left school in 2007 and during that time I wanted to go back and play Australian schoolboys was my goal, to make the Australian schoolboys squad. And there was sort of an avenue you could go down where you'd go to TAFE and do a TAFE course. And then you'd be eligible to be selected for the Australian schoolboys because we're a year behind the Eastern States. So I went down that path and ended up making the Aussie schoolboys team. And I was also in the Force Academy training with those guys and ended up going on sort of the Force UK tour at the end of 2008 played against Fiji for the schoolboys. And then beyond that, 2009, signed my first professional contract with Western Force for a couple of years. That same year, played sort of Aussie under 20s, and went on a number of tours, whether it was with the 4-7s team or with the Aussie under 20s. So I got to travel to South Africa, New Zealand, Pacific Islands like Samoa and Fiji, and then with the Aussie under 20s in 2010, I went to Argentina, which was amazing. And then, kind of played professional rugby for the Force up until 2012, where I had a number of significant injuries, specifically to my knee. And so after 2012, I kind of moved upstairs to the Rugby WA Development Officer Department. So I was out coaching kids in schools and running clinics and stuff, and did that for a couple of years and became a qualified personal trainer. Got my Cert 3 and 4 in fitness. And kind of started up my own personal training business and ran that for a number of years. Got called back into the Force just through injuries. Their halfbacks were kind of wearing thin, and I was just in and around the environment for a while. So I ended up playing a few more games. And then in 2016, the rugby had kind of slowed down. I played a little bit of club rugby in Perth, but the knee injuries really took its toll. I moved over to London, and I lived there for 2.5 years working as a personal trainer and just traveling a whole bunch of countries in Europe. And had an absolutely amazing experience. Good to see sort of that side of the world in the Northern Hemisphere. And then came back at the end of 2018. And since I've been back in Perth the last sort of year and a half, still going with my personal training business, but I've just started my Masters of Teaching course at ECU. So I'm heading down the route of Steve and hopefully be a school teacher, fingers crossed, at Hale one day.
Excellent. Justin, you mentioned obviously you're starting at the Western Force, playing professionally in 2009, and it's amazing that's over 10 years ago already. But against who was your first game, and what memories would you have of that?
Yeah, so my first game, Super Rugby game, was at NIB Stadium against the Stormers in 2010. I came on off the bench. I think we were behind by maybe about sort of 15 points or so, or 10 points. Came on, played the last 20 minutes, and sort of long story short, we ended up winning after the siren with a drop goal. And so, that was unbelievably exciting, something I'll certainly never, ever forget. And had a couple encounters with those big South African boys, which also I'll never forget. So, amazing experience, and certainly one of the highlights of my rugby career.
And then about the same time, you were representing the Australian under-20s at World Cups. What were some of your memories from the years you had in that team?
Yeah, the Aussie under-20s was definitely a step up. I was still sort of a youngster in the sort of Super Rugby ranks, but then when you got to under-20s, everyone's obviously the same age, so the professionalism and the expectation was a little bit higher on all the players. And we played the World Cup that year was in Argentina, so we went straight to Buenos Aires, which the experiences and stuff you get through rugby are amazing, and that's definitely one of the highlights, getting to travel. The teammates that I had were some of the highest caliber. I sort of played with Hooper and Matty Timur and all these guys that have gone on to have amazing careers. So, certainly appreciate the time I had and the opportunities I got. Looking back, it was obviously cut short with a little bit of injuries, but certainly wouldn't change it for the world.
At that time, I remember you being spoken about in the media as a possible Wallaby tourist for the spring tour end of the year. And looking back on that now, and obviously what was to happen next, how do you look back and reflect on those stories of what might have been?
Yeah, it can be a little bit like, you can almost get a bit bitter about it and stuff, but to be honest with you, I was pretty humbled to be spoken of as sort of a potential Wallaby back in those days. I always felt pretty lucky to be a professional rugby player, and so I was super humbled and to be just spoken about in that sort of light. The sort of the experience I had at Aussie under-20s, and then got mentioned to sort of potentially make the Wallaby spring tour that year, and then obviously got cut down with a knee injury. And initially I was absolutely devastated that I wasn't going to be able to play the rest of the World Cup tournament. And then you start to think further on, like, shit, that could have been potentially a Wallaby sort of cap maybe. Kind of just stuck to sort of the positives as much as you can. I knew I had another Super Rugby season in me, and that was coming up. And I always felt quite lucky that I was a part of a professional program going through all these injuries, because I had the resources of professional physios and the whole professional environment supporting you through what can be a pretty tough time. But I kind of came through that and ended up playing again in 2011. So yeah, unfortunately didn't quite get to the Wallabies ranking, but the time I had with the 20s and the players I've mixed with and the relationships I've built has been amazing.
You know, a lot of the young guys listening and might well aspire to be a professional sports person, and I think they're always sort of given their advice that, you know, you're one injury away from that. Just from your experience at the time, thinking back on, you know, the fact that you're studying now, what advice would you give to young aspiring guys who might put all those eggs in one basket?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I was one that kind of had one vision, one goal, plan A, and that was about it. And I just wanted to go down the rugby path. So, your rugby career, even if you have a very successful long career, it's never really going to be more than, I'd say, 10 years. So you do have to have a bit of a backup plan. So I would encourage all boys, no matter how talented and how bright your future looks in professional sport, to have something to fall back on and keep studying and keep your sort of your options open. And I think the professional sports sort of industry and organisations are pretty good at making sure that the players have something else outside of rugby. And to be honest with you, in terms of being your best player and kind of getting the most out of yourself, it's so good to have something else other than the rugby. I've generally found the best players that kind of get the most out of themselves and excel often have something else, and rugby or the sport that they're playing isn't their be-all and end-all and isn't everything. They've just got that sort of professional work-life balance really, really well down pat. So, yeah, if I was a youngster, and no matter how sort of brightly you're spoken of and your future's going to be down to professional footy or AFL or rugby, I would really encourage everyone to keep studying or keep something else outside of that going, because, you never know. You're one injury away from making your career, but you're also one injury away from it all being over. So, yeah, keep studying.
Yeah, you speak about some of those players who you found were well balanced, and certainly in your time at Hale, if you look back and said, you know, there was a guy who was sort of the best player or teammate, who would have that been at Hale, and why?
Well, you can't go past the obvious answer for that would be Dane Hale. He's obviously gone on to play for the Wallabies for a number of times and captaining the Rebels at the moment. So in terms of being successful on the field, he's definitely a standout. And particularly maybe in the last 5 years, it's been really, really enjoyable to see Dane's development and how mature he's become. He was quite a flamboyant player on the field. But to see him mature as a player and also just as a person, and to see him go down different paths in business and becoming a bit more entrepreneurial and starting his own healthy cafe business and just being a well-balanced man and very highly respected in the rugby circles now. So at school was always Dane and that. But other guys like Al Rivera, always a super hard worker on the field, and Mark Schmidt as well. He was probably one of the best players at school. Quietly spoken, went about his work sort of on his own terms, but completely excelled, had some really, really sort of unbelievable touches of the ball and stuff. So those guys were great, and I'm still very close with all of them now. And to see them sort of finishing up their rugby sort of circles now, but going on in other areas and doing so well outside of school is, it's pretty cool to watch.
Obviously, the injuries, you mentioned being bitter, certainly about that, but and I've no doubt, looking back at your career, that certainly must have been a significant mental challenge for you. How did you get through that, and what did you learn from those periods, and any advice for our boys who face similar challenges?
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, it's tough times when you get injured. It always feels like it's a little bit unfair, and the timing you can never really control. But yeah, it's a tough thing to handle. But my advice would be to sort of just control what you can, really. So if you do get cut down with injury, obviously take time to kind of maybe deal with the initial disappointment. I think it's important to kind of have that downtime and sort of step away. You don't want to just dive straight back into it and never really kind of feel you can't feel sorry for yourself. It's not a nice thing to do, to get injured and hurt or have some mentally tough times. So don't feel bad if you are feeling down. It's completely normal. But yeah, I would encourage people to take action as quick as possible. So sort of the whole power of now, get going again with a normal routine or get an action plan into place. Also sharing and talking with other teammates, friends, family, anyone else who supports you. Just sharing what you're going through is obviously a huge one. And you'll realise that you aren't alone, and it's very normal to sort of feel down and kind of have a few tough times. It's all a part of being human. And then, get a bit of a plan in place, a routine. Make sure that it is a sustainable, achievable sort of plan you've got. You just have to look about what everyone's going through at the moment. We just have to kind of be grateful for what we do have. We've all sort of hopefully got food and a home and family and our health for now. So just take care of each other and look out for your mate, but also don't feel afraid to share. And it is normal to sort of have tough times, but yeah, we'll all come through together, I reckon.
Some really good messages in there, Justin. On a lighter note, we'll finish with two questions that we've asked everyone that we've spoken to. Birkenstocks are a bit of a craze over here in Perth. I think it's fair to say they're probably frowned upon in the rest of the country. Do you own a pair, and do you think they're an acceptable form of footwear?
Geez, it's quite relevant for me at the moment because I've actually just bought a pair of Birkenstocks for about a week ago.
Oh wow! You got the receipt still?
Yeah, I must say I didn't pay full price as well. They weren't even on sale. Okay. But they're not my first pair. Like back in the day with the Force, we actually got given a pair, and I completely frowned. I was not going to be seen in those. But maybe getting a little bit older now, I've come to terms of wearing the sort of grandpa-looking sandals, and I hate to admit it, but I'm a fan, and yeah, I think they're absolutely acceptable.
Do you wear them with or without socks?
No, you can't wear them with socks. If you wear them with socks, that's a whole new ballpark. But no, without socks, down the beach, going to get a coffee, completely acceptable.
Okay,
so,
all good.
Can't beat them, join them.
All good. And how do you eat a meat pie? And I asked this, and I'll give you some background, that Tuesday here is Boarders and Staff Pie Day. Now, I don't think you were a boarder, but all the boarders go in, they get the pies, and some of their techniques in eating them create controversy, whether that's lifting the roof off and digging in with a fork, sometimes a spoon, sometimes the sauce goes in and the roof gets thrown out, or some of them just eat the roof with the sauce and not the pie. How does Justin Turner eat a pie?
I haven't really put too much thought into how I eat the pie. I would probably keep it in its wrapper so you're not burning your fingers and it's not crumbling everywhere. But
that's abnormal right there, to be honest. Most people would just take it on. But anyway, go on. Yeah.
Put a bit of sauce on the top and then just keep it in both hands and eat your way down. You don't need any cutlery for a pie, that's for sure. It's a double-handed job, I reckon, and just eat all the way down. Try not to burn the hell out of your mouth, but yeah, just get stuck in head first. That's
a solid response, Justin. But on behalf of Steve and I, thanks again, and all the boys listening. Thanks again for giving us a little bit of time. I hope everything goes well, and you're teaching in your masters in teaching. You get that done soon, and you never know where you're going to end up. You might be back in the double blue.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Steve.
No worries.
Great. Cheers, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Cheers, guys. Bye.